So, this one I decided to entitle. First of all, I was going to entitle it Who Am I? But not that the title is very important, but I decided to call this one with the same title as a very famous talk by Mr. Alan Watts called A Conversation with Myself. For various reasons, most of them merely ironic, or for self-amusement. One of those reasons being, of course, the fact that I do not sit before anybody listening to me right now. I'm sat alone. So this is in truth, really, and in truth, a conversation with myself, because there's nobody else here. So in a literal sense, or in context with how we humans see the world, I'm talking to myself, not anybody else. If anybody comes along and listens to it later, that's another matter, but right now this is a conversation with myself. It might be planned for others to listen to or not, but it's still true to be able to call this particular talk I am giving a conversation with myself. So that's the title of this talk. Today I was contemplating that within my mind all the thoughts which arise and fade away, which occur in my consciousness, all the thoughts which come to pass, all of them, almost all, without exception, I conclude and find to be pure Avijja, 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 false view, wrong view, false view of reality and experience of reality through the mirror of illusion of a self that does not truly exist in any persistent manner. And that despite the fact that I recognize this cloud of thoughts which fill me throughout the day, from moment to moment, I recognize that it is purely Avijja, 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 illusory thought. It's an illusion. Despite this fact, I'm still caught up in it, and it drowns me every day, as it does all beings in samsara, in the Vata Chakra, the cycle of becoming, being born, and even between being born and dying, in that space between which we call our lives, which are not ours because we can't keep them. They are taken from us not when we want. We have no control over them, so they're not even our lives, but we call them our lives. So this Avijja drowns our minds every day. And seeing as I'm speaking to myself, and this is a conversation with myself, I should say, it drowns my mind every day. And speak for myself instead of for others, because to speak of others is to make assumptions that others are just as is oneself, or one believes the illusion of oneself to be. So perhaps I shall just speak for myself. I am drowned in this Avijja, and the worst thing is, I know it. And so one should consider that if one finds oneself, encounters oneself in a position where one knows one's situation, but one is still unable to free oneself from that situation, what kind of stage or section of the path, or space-time of the path, place and time. What here and now of the path is that to be in? Seeing as we like to take the path, which is one long line, unbroken, and split it into separate categories with our illusory, samsaric, dualistic thoughts, such as the 4 kinds of enlightened beings. In truth, you're either enlightened or you're not. You can't be like semi-enlightened. You're either born or you're not. You're alive or you're not. You can't be both. So, what is all these 4 and 8 kinds? First of all, they start with the 4, the Sotapanna, the Sagitakami, the Anakami, and the Arahat. And then they split that into attaining the path, but not yet attaining the fruit, and then attaining the fruit. So when one has entered the path of becoming a Sotapanna, but is not yet a Sotapanna, then one is already Sotapatimaka, path of Sotapanna, one of the 8 kinds of noble persons. You know, you can make this as 16 or 12 or 4 or 3 or 2. That's all imaginary. But it's useful to teach before one can attain the understanding that is able to see beyond such imaginary concepts and still understand the Dhamma that lies within those concepts. The same goes for words. All words, these which I am saying right now even, they are all conditioned subjects or objects, depending on your point of view. And they can never encapsulate the Absolute or the Dhamma. Dhamma or Dharma. Dhamma or Dharma, 2 spellings, one with an R, one with a D-H-A-M-M-A, and one with D-H-A-R-M-A. Both mean the same thing. Which is right? Neither of them. Who cares? Both of them are just words which represent something which is completely wordless and unable to be encapsulated or described in words. So either of those words are also both imaginary abstractions, mental abstractions, concepts for something which is beyond all words. So there you have it. Words contain nothing except what you make out of them, or what one has commonly agreed upon that they are supposed to mean, at best. So, in this conversation with myself, and those who listen to it and converse with themselves in interaction with this, if anybody listens, then I should say the important point which I like this talk to focus upon is the fact that the mind is swimming in Avijja and illusory thought that I have a self to defend, or I have a self to defend its honor, or I have to defend my rights, or I have to give preference to myself, or somebody has offended myself, and so on and so on and so on. When we think like this, then emotions arise. I believe that from observing myself, that when one dwells on a negative thought, emotions arise that are negative, and when one dwells on a positive thought, sometimes emotions that are blissful arise. And there's that which lies between, which I don't want to talk about in this talk, which is the apiyagrit, neither or. It's like a dull, like a limbo kind of mood, But I don't want to talk about that one in this talk. And I don't have to, because I'm talking with myself. There's nobody else to talk to, and even that self isn't really there. But something is there, and that something is that which is talking. It is beyond all self. And that which speaks is not self. That which speaks is, but is not something, is not a thing which is limited to being something. I suppose that is what is meant by the word anatta, not self. Anatta, all things are anatta, all dhammas, all dharmas, all phenomena are not self, do not have an inherent quality which can be held or taken to be a self. It means nothing is unchanging, and because everything is in constant flux, there is no self that can survive, because flux is the birth and death of everything in a single instant. It ceases as just slightly after it arises in time. In how much time, that depends on the particular instant, but it's all an ocean of becoming, and it's a roiling sea, and it is, as far as the material universe is concerned, and manifest life in the flesh is dukkha, unsatisfactory. It is an unsatisfactory condition to be in. I think people call it the human condition, or the existential dilemma. Whether one is conscious of that existential dilemma or not is not relevant. Some beings are conscious of it, of its presence, the presence of dukkha, in greater or lesser extent, but ever present, and some people are not aware of it. Most people who have truly become Buddhist, many of them became Buddhist because they see or have seen dukkha. Some people see dukkha and never find a path such as Buddhism offers. Buddhism is just a conditioned imaginary thing, but it points the way correctly towards arriving at the path. So that is why it is important. Otherwise, it is not essential to enlightenment or self-liberation, because it is just a conditioned imaginary religion or philosophy, but it is correctly composed by an enlightened being and is about as close to perfect as words can get. So I think on this planet, the best bet you can have to finding out how to lay your hand to practice, to apply your practice into cultivating causes and allowing those causes to grow into fruits or results, effects of the causes, and make them auspicious causes, to learn the techniques of practicing the cultivation of auspicious causes of auspicious dhammas, and avoid the opposite, of course. That is actually that is samavayama, right effort in the Eightfold Path. To completely fulfill that goal and that mission is to practice the four samapadanas, which means to practice auspicious dhammas now and in the future, to not destroy auspicious dhammas you have already done in the past, to leave behind inauspicious dhammas that you have begotten in the past, and to avoid and not make inauspicious dhammas now or in the future. That's 4 things. It's actually easier than that. You just have to do 2 things. You have to just do kusala dhamma, auspicious dhammas, and refrain from agusala dhamma, inauspicious dhammas. To make auspicious dhammas is one of the 4 practices, but by doing that one, you also complete one of the other 4 in the killing 2 birds in 1 stone, with 1 stone throw. Because by creating auspicious acts, you are also leaving behind the inauspicious acts of the past. You are equaling out the karmic balance in your conscience. And so just do good and avoid evil, basically. To practice the 4 samapadanas is right effort. I wish we could do it. I wish I could. Now I'm calling myself we, you see. I'm having a conversation with myself, so I'm listening and I'm talking. So now it's starting to call myself we. There's still nobody here. Because as we've all agreed, or those of us who do agree on this, that all things are anatta, and us two, me, myself, and I, we both agree. All things are anatta, and that we do not exist. So I think this conversation with myself, therefore, does also not exist, and thus we can close this conversation right now. For it has achieved its goal, and I think the point which I intended to make about Avijja and its presence and developing awareness of its presence, despite the distastefulness of its essence, it is required to know it in this way in order to recognize and turn to recognize dukkha and to turn to look at the path, to have a reason to aim for the path and to know why the path is the path. And as a last note, I will leave you with a little helping hand on the contemplation of dukkha. That dukkha is always present, and that if you don't believe it, just find the most comfortable position you can, be it in a hammock, on a beanbag, or on a rubber mat, or whatever, a yoga mat, whatever you want. And then when you find your most comfortable position, where you feel blissfully relaxed, don't move, and stay in that position. And after 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, without moving from that most comfortable position, see how much dukkha or uncomfortableness, discomfort arises. See if stress begins to arise, and how from less evident it grows towards being more evident, and the noticeability of it gets stronger, and you see that actually dukkha is always present, but it's just that you keep changing position and moving. Hence, you do not notice its presence because you keep reducing its factors by changing position. But you do not remove its presence, you just diminish it through constant action, which means restlessness. Restlessness is dukkha, for there is no rest, no respite, there is no end to it. It's constant. That is to contemplate the dukkha that is ever present. So, I would like to end this conversation and say good night to you all, and hope that there is some truth to be found for some within these words, and that those truths, if found, may be useful in finding and attaining the path and the fruits of which I have spoken. This is an imaginary person who is commonly referred to as a John Spencer. Wishing you all well. and myself, signing off.